Hi there, welcome to the Nitty Gritty Writing Podcast. I'm Simon Cantan.
And I'm Dave Higgins.
And this week we're going to be talking about Leitmotif, or Leitmotif, or wherever you say it. It's German. But before we do that, we'll do our usual weekly roundup. And Dave, you can go first.
Right. Another episode of Seven Stones. Planned, written, polished, and published. And that's already getting some interest from people. So that's fairly good, considering how long I've had the series going, that people still like it. Finished off the redraft of a story that I'm submitting to an anthology. So all that's left is the polishing out the commas and so on. So that's almost good to go. What else have I done this week? A bit more editing of stuff for other people. So that's me for the week.
Good. For me, I've done about 3/4 of my read-through of Sorcery, which is the book I'm writing with Dave. It's the third book in the Dragons and Magic series, and it's going really well so far. It was the book that I was the most uncertain about when I wrote the first draft, but going through it again, it's all working really well, I think. Otherwise, I have a many books feature today. So I've seen the downloads for Hard Vacuum go shooting up. That's pretty cool. The day's not over, so I don't know how much it'll be worth in total, but I believe it was about $19, and I've had about 200 downloads so far. And on that series, I see between 5 to 10% people buy the next book in the series. The first one's perma-free. So it should easily pay itself back. Otherwise, yeah, just my wife has been busy with family things for the whole week. So I've noticed the fact that I have to pick up my kids from the kindergarten every day has been cutting my writing time in about half. So I haven't got through very much. Oh, and she also spotted she was reading my Blood Cruel book and spotted Trains. So Katie was standing on the platform looking at the trains, which went through my editing process, and I managed to get through. And a lot of other people. So I think, and it's just a guess, but I think on the digital version, it came at the end of a page. And in the paperback version, it came in the middle of a page. So at the end of a page, you'd read, Katie was standing on the platform looking at the trains, and then go to the next page and see trains, blah, 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 and you wouldn't even think about it. But on the paperback, you see it in the same.
Yeah, because I didn't catch that. So must be slipped, yeah, on the standard size for a Kindle. It must be breaking somehow, so you don't notice.
Or it just when people are reading, they don't happen to notice. Happens all the time that usually if I'm starting to notice grammar and spelling errors, it's because I'm not enjoying the book as much. If it's a slow bit, then I'm forcing myself to read, and it's when you're actually starting and stopping that you start noticing all the grammar errors. Yeah, apart from that, there's one thing I could mention. I don't know if you want me to mention, Dave, about something I noticed in your writing that that's cropping up over and over. Maybe we should talk about it in private, but I thought it might be something that people want to know in general.
Yeah.
And that's extra words that aren't necessary are things I'm cutting out in the edit. So, for example, Peony wasn't sure what to do at all, and then I just cut out at all. She wasn't sure what to do. So not a major issue, and the sentence still makes perfect sense, but it's just something I have been cutting out quite a bit. Yeah, that was the only minor note. As I say, otherwise it's really good. So yeah, onto our topic. So I suggested this topic, which is leitmotifs, and that was because I watched a video about leitmotifs explaining what they are, and I found it really interesting, so I thought I'd raise it in terms of fiction. So I tried to find the original video. The problem is that I watch, I don't know, 20 YouTube videos a day, and I looked at it 3 weeks ago, so there is no chance of me finding it again, and YouTube has no way of searching within your history. So leitmotifs are from opera, and it's Wagner that came up with them, and it's a short section of notes that signifies a certain character or a certain situation. So, you know, a few might be the hero. And then when the hero is meeting the villain who has another leitmotif, then the two of those combine into a piece of music. So I thought this was very interesting, and I thought that how could you do it in fiction? So the reason they do it's done is that then you're kind of reminded, like the leitmotif for a hero would be a heroic few notes. So if, for instance, in Star Wars it'd be da 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 da. So and then when Darth Vader comes on, it's dun 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 da da da. So you even hear that, I mean, Star Wars uses it. You hear when there's a part where Luke and Vader know that the other person is nearby, and it plays their few notes for their themes, so that they're looking out the window, and that kind of signifies that they know that the other person is there. So we don't have music, obviously, in books, but we do have words. So I wondered if there was a way to come up with a section of either description or of dialogue that kind of gave the impression of a character, but you could use in multiple ways. So then I thought about that for a while, and then I thought, well, that already exists, and that's The Princess Bride. Because in The Princess Bride, both the movie and the book, they have words that are used in different ways throughout the book and throughout the movie. So inconceivable with Fezzik. My name is Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die. Which in the movie obviously is said at the end in a lot of different ways, that the character or the actor says it in a different way depending on how the battle is going. Or farm boy, as you wish, is used over and over. Even then, at the end of the movie, I guess this is spoilers, but not really major spoilers, hopefully. That at the end, when the Walter Matthau, no, it's not Walter Matthau, who's it? Anyway, when the grandfather is finished reading the story, he says, Peter "As Falk. You wish." Huh?
Is it Peter Falk?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So he even says "as you wish," because "as you wish" means "I love you" in the story. So I thought, well, it obviously works there. They've used those words in that phrase to signify a character, and it has worked because it has been used in different ways in different situations, and obviously in a very clever way signifies different things. It's that character bringing their personality to different situations through that phrase. So what do you think, Dave?
Well, I was coming at it from the other end, that I like Wagner. I've got 2 different versions of the Ring Cycle, And it's brilliant. His use of recurring themes is brilliant. But if you think about The Princess Bride, the things you remember don't actually appear that often. There's actually, it's not packed with him saying, "My name is Inigo Montoya, prepare to die," every time he's there. And there are an awful lot of scenes with him in where he doesn't say it. So the thing is that in Wagner, in other operas that use it, in soundtracks to movies and so on that use leitmotif, they can use it because we're used to music being the same. If you think about a song as opposed to a poem, in a song we're used to having the chorus repeat over and over again, whereas in a poem, having the same couplet over and over again gets wearing more quickly. So I think in written, as opposed to musical expression, you have to have a lighter hand. That where Wagner can have the music for the ring in every scene that has the ring in, Lord of the Rings doesn't have someone talking about the ring in every single scene the ring is in. There are scenes where it's just there. And it's slightly easier in the film because you can have it hanging around Frodo's neck so people can see it. In the book, you just remember it's there. You don't have the ring words in every scene. So it is possible, but it takes a lighter hand to do it in prose than it does in some other media.
I mean, I think that's definitely the case because overdo it and it'll get very wearing. But it could definitely be used in the case of showing a relationship between two characters. So, I mean, this is a very kind of, this was before I came across this video, and it's something I was just attempting to do. But in Blood Cruel, this is a major spoiler for Blood Cruel, by the way. But oh, you've got through the whole book, though.
I finished it yesterday. Yeah, so I was just covering my ears for comic effect.
And I guess I can talk about it without spoiling it. But that Katie's father refers to her as Monkey the whole time. So says, you know, "Come on, Monkey, you need to do this," or whatever. So that was my attempt at kind of signifying their relationship, that it was a special word. Like he could have said honey or dear or sweetheart or whatever. But it was a way of signifying their kind of playful relationship, that it was closer than any old father and child. So that's not really a leitmotif, but that's the kind of thing I'm thinking of for and I don't have any concrete examples of what I'd like to try, but I think there must be a way to have going back to The Princess Bride for a second, at the start, Buttercup realizes that every time Wesley says "as you wish," he means "I love you." So that means that then, as an audience, every time he says "as you wish," we have an extra layer of it's their special way. If he just said "I love you" over and over, it wouldn't have had the significance that having a special phrase does, because that for us then brings back the kind of, we think back to, oh yeah, that means "I love you," so therefore it kind of makes you think about it a bit more than you would otherwise if he was just saying "I love you." So I wonder if there's a way to, it doesn't even have to be love, it could be hate, or it could be anything really, but a way of having a phrase or having something like, it doesn't have to be dialogue either. It could be, say a character is an older brother and always rests his hand on his younger brother's shoulder before he does something for him. And then the older and younger brother go to war, and one of them has to charge into a suicide mission. And the older brother puts his hand on the younger brother's shoulder and then goes. Or switch it, and the younger brother puts his hand on the older brother's shoulder and then goes on the suicide mission. That it'd be a way of kind of keeping, of forging a deeper connection between the characters, that kind of, instead of just hitting the nail on the head and saying, so he was going to sacrifice himself just like his brother had sacrificed himself for him all those years, or anything like that. You just say it without saying it, which I think is always the deeper way of connecting to characters, is where the audience has it in the readers have it in their head. They're not necessarily, they're not having to be told something, because when they're told something, they don't feel it. They just experience, they hear it or read it. So yeah, that was kind of my thoughts on it. I just thought we always talk about marketing and that kind of thing, so it'd be interesting to kind of talk about technical aspects of writing like that.
Yeah, I've been trying to work in ways that aren't dialogue for putting a leitmotif in, and that your action beats is a good idea. I've been wondering if you could do it with description. So could you, because if you think about sort of some films, particularly art house films of a certain type, there are things that happen around characters, particularly in sort of the more magical realist art house end. So the weather changes when they're there. So I was wondering whether it would be possible to assign a series of environmental effects to it.
Yeah.
If you think about it, sort of in a fantasy book or a horror book, certain mystical things have, not stigmata isn't the word, it's not symptoms. That when you get a ghost, the temperature drops and the people's hair stands on end, and when sort of certain magic's used, you get a feeling like electricity, whatever. So I was wondering whether you could take that and use it as a leitmotif for characters. So not that the character actually, whenever he's around, causes the temperature to drop or people to feel like static electricity, but a more subtle, the words you use to describe the light in the scene come from a particular closed set.
Yeah,
I mean that would I was wondering if that would restrict you too much, because then if you've got a character who always has gloom around them and a character who always have light around them, and then they meet, which they're probably going to do, because writing a book in which you have two characters who never interact is going to be an interesting subset of books. Not impossible, but much less likely than one where two characters who have leitmotifs do interact. You'd be stuck with a day where it was rainy and sunny at the same time, which would, whilst again not meteorologically impossible, be a bit of an interesting scene to try and write.
Well, you don't, like, you could have it in the description of the surroundings. So I was thinking, if you had say you had a character who's a child and their father is a drunk who's violent. So every time they every time they know they're in trouble is when they see their father's shadow through the doorway of their room, and it's a dark, imposing shadow. So then they grow up, and maybe the baddie has another dark, imposing shadow. And then they go through the whole story and they defeat the baddie, but then they notice that they have the dark, imposing shadow. That would be a way of signifying that they've become the bully that they never wanted to be. So that's no dialogue. There's no, like, it's not even a hand on the shoulder. It's just something in the surroundings that they notice that that signifies a certain characteristic of a character. So yeah, the other thing I was thinking what you could do is the description of the characters. So if at the start of a book someone much admired the handsome and dashing John, and then by the end they'd realized that John was a complete coward, and they went, so I walked away from the handsome and dashing John, or I saw him quivering in a corner or something, that the words become sarcastic, rather like that it's this person has been handsome and dashing the whole way through, and now they're handsome and dashing because it's just a facade. It's not the real person beneath. So I think there's a lot of different ways you can do it. And it's a question of what's the most, like, every single one of those would work in different situations depending on what the story requires and what would give it extra depth. Like, I've been considering recently that in my preparation for writing a story, so what happens with me, I think I've mentioned it before, is that I outline a story, then I start writing. Usually it changes a lot as I keep writing the story from the outline. And then I get to the end, and once I've finished the story, editing is a pain in the neck, that I don't like editing at all. So it becomes really slow and tedious to edit a story. So I'm trying to work out what the things are that I need to do in the edit that I can move to the outlining phase. So I think I need to do more world building, which is one thing. But another thing that could happen, could be useful, is moving the descriptions and the character signifiers, like leitmotif signifiers, into the outlining phase before I write. So if I had a thing which said the older brother always puts his hand on the younger brother's shoulder, then as I'm writing the first draft, I can be going through and going, okay, well, this is a good part for the older brother to put his hand on the younger brother's shoulder. And I may plan for the suicide mission at the end of the book and then get there and that doesn't make sense, but find another way to use that signifier. But that's something that could, I don't know, for me at least, be useful in the outlining phase, because it gives an extra way for characters to relate to one another, which is kind of the most important thing in a story, is that the characters are believable and that the readers can relate to them. Which I mentioned last week. I watched that Netflix movie Arc, and the characters were just cardboard cutouts for me, so it didn't mean anything to me at all. I've had a run of, just going off topic for a second, a run of trying to find TV shows to watch that have believable, relatable characters, and it's just been nothing for a long time. Oh, one thing I can mention, I don't know if you had more on Leitmotif, but I had an aside.
Go on.
So we were talking about crime, my wife and I was saying, well, it's always the same people. The reason why I don't like watching crime or reading crime is because it's always the same people. There's the the wife who pretends to be doting and is actually sick of the marriage and wants to get out of it. There's the business partner who always wants to take control of the other side of the business but pretends like they're best friends. There's the assistant who always is jealous of the success of their master, if they're an apprentice, and thinks that they should be in the spotlight instead of that person. So there's a list of kind of the same people. There's the best friend who's sleeping with the wife behind the dead guy's back, and then so there's a list of the same people over and over and over in every single crime story pretty much. And I thought, well, what if none of them did it? So you have all these stereotypes of who did it, and none of them did it, but it was a random act of violence. Just someone wanted the guy's wallet. It wasn't actually planned at all. So I was talking about this in the car with my wife, and I said, well, that wouldn't be a satisfying story. However, if in the course of the investigation, you had all these nasty people who are thinking about things for selfish reasons, but they all learn something in the course of that. They all become better people in the course of the story because of how the investigation goes, or what they discover about the dead guy, or even the fact that the guy is dead, so they don't have him doing whatever he was doing while he was alive, and they realize that they actually miss him. That would become a more satisfying story, even if he died for random reasons and no one had actually killed him. I think crime readers or crime viewers would hate it. They would despise it, but people who didn't read crime on a regular basis might actually like it.
I don't know. Have you seen? Oh, crikey, what's it called? It's a Dutch series about a group of sisters trying to kill their brother-in-law.
Doesn't sound familiar, at least.
Come on, brain. You can tell me what it is. I knew what it was called when you started giving your description. I thought, oh yes, I know a television series that would relate to that, and now I cannot remember what it's called. Oh, crikey.
Series.
Blast it, brain. Come on, work. Anyway, the Outlaws. That's it. They're trying to kill their brother for various reasons. And each episode is about an attempt to kill their brother-in-law, and also reveals a certain amount about why they want him dead, and a certain amount about him, and how trying to kill him changes them. So it's not a crime story in the sense that someone's dead, we don't know who's done it, and the detective is investigating and uncovering these motives. It's more sort of use of dramatic irony. So the viewer knows why they'd want to kill him, but also, because it's a series, it's more about the attempts and them trying to work out how to hide it than it is about him actually now being dead. Because obviously you can't have him die in the first episode, because then the rest of the series doesn't have any attempts. So they're trying to do it. And I think you can do something where it isn't about this person was killed, here are possible suspects, and still make it interesting to crime fans. Unless I'm off beam, because I like really obscure, non-standard stuff. So possibly I think it's great, and Dutch people think it's great, but people who love your standard thriller wouldn't, because it's not about investigating a crime.
Well, I mean, that's the thing I liked about True Detective and then didn't like about True Detective season 1 was that True Detective was not a standard crime thing. So everyone raved about it, and I went, well, I hate crime, but I'll try the first episode. And then I was drawn in, because there is someone killed and they have to investigate the murder, but they don't. The investigation takes decades, and it's more about the people they become, the people they are, and the people they become in the investigation than it is about the crime itself.
Mm.
And they're interesting enough characters and different enough characters that you want to watch their interactions. So it's not really a crime drama. Now, it was incredibly popular. So I think, but not necessarily among crime viewers, people who watch CSI might not like True Detective or might not like The Wire, for instance. But I think you can find an audience among the people who are sick of the same CSI plot over and over and over, where it's, oh yeah, you can tell who did it in the first 5 minutes because it's that guy who's being really nice, who you kind of recognize from another show.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about that recently, about how to shift things just enough that it makes them more interesting than they would be otherwise. Things like adding leitmotifs or changing the expectations of a genre, which, as I say, would probably put off the people who like that genre. Crime fans who just like, here's the body, you discover the body, there's Hercule Poirot comes in, he says everyone's stupid, it's because of this, but he's proved slightly wrong, and then he does this and this and this, and then gathers everyone into a room and says who actually did it. People like that would, if he then said, oh, it was actually just some random burglar who broke in and hit him over the head with a statue and didn't mean to kill him, those people, I think, would be fairly disappointed, and you would have to then find an audience outside of those people, and that's where the tricky thing would be.
You have to do it. I did. It's a couple of weeks ago. I was watching a crime drama. I quite like a good crime drama as something to watch when I want to relax, because it uses a different part of my brain from other things. And the twist there was that someone was already dead when they were murdered. So it wasn't a murder by the person you thought it was, because they'd committed suicide, but they'd committed suicide in a relatively painless way. And so the twist was, it looked, and they were discovered hanging by the neck, and everyone thought, oh no, it's suicide. And then the smart investigator goes, these little subtle things aren't quite right, and starts off a murder investigation, and it turns out, well, they were hung by someone else rather than hanging themselves. And then it turns out at the very end that actually they'd committed suicide using drugs. And this person thought they'd found them asleep and grabbed them round the throat, thought they'd choked them to death, and so faked a hanging. So yeah, you can go a certain way outside the usual, but the one in which it was no one who was there. So I think you could do that someone had committed suicide and it looked like a murder, or was mistaken for a murder, and all of these people who had reason to murder them are investigated, and it turns out at the end that none of them did it. The person did it themselves. But I think, yeah, I agree that an accident or a random killing by someone who's never caught wouldn't be satisfying enough for the standard crime readers. They sort of, because I think part of what a lot of crime readers look for, from what I've seen of reviews, is whether or not you can work it out. Because there's a huge farrago about Sherlock Holmes, where the original Sherlock Holmes stories, Holmes spots things but Conan Doyle doesn't tell the reader everything he spotted. So when it comes to the end and Holmes is unraveling his story, he calls people together, he accuses someone and goes, and of course, as I spotted, but Dr. Watson completely missed, there was a small smear of red mud on one of the doorsteps, and you work in a diamond mine, and diamond mud is reddish. So clearly it was you. And Watson goes, oh, drat, I didn't spot that. But because Watson is the point of view character, that means the reader doesn't know. So the reader's left thinking, well, how was I supposed to work that out then? Where I think possibly it wouldn't work for people who like to work it out. And there's a certain part of me that likes to work it out. But there's also a certain part of me that likes characters. So a story in which lots of people had reasons to kill him and we got insights into them and the process of investigation and how the investigation taxed the detective and how people's behavior changed now the person they potentially wanted to kill was dead, and whether some of them actually improved their lives, whether some of them got worse now they didn't have someone to push against, because actually they were propping themselves up on this image of being victimized by someone, and now the person isn't there, they don't have anyone to blame for the things that are partially their fault. So that would interest me, but it's more, that's sounding more literary fiction rather than a police procedural or crime thriller.
And the trouble is that telling people that in any way would spoil the whole ending.
Yeah. Which I think is, because if you, that would make sales and listing on book sites and so on tricky. Because if you didn't put it in the police, if you listed it somewhere other than crime thrillers, people would pick it up and think, oh, this is a crime thriller, that this shouldn't be in the literary fiction section, and this isn't what I was looking for. But if you do, then you're going to get people getting to the end, and then you're going to get reviews that basically spoil the plot because someone's knocked off the fact that it isn't what they're expecting, so they'll tell people why. So it would be a lovely book if you could find a way to pitch it to the audience without spoiling the twist, which I think is where genre is both very useful and very not. Because if you want to find an audience for the book, you'd have to pitch it at people who are looking for that kind of thing, which means you need a label for what it is. But also you need to find a label that doesn't spoil things or put expectations on it. So maybe you could do something different. Maybe if you wrote it as a fantasy or a science fiction, so you're pitching it to people as a police procedural set in the Shire. So CSI Middle-earth.
I don't know. For me, at least, that would kind of undercut the whole. Like the whole point of it, I think, is to turn a genre on its head. So then, giving another twist would kind of undercut the whole point. That this is. And I
don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just the fact that I don't see genres as being separate. So you see, horror is an emotion, whereas science fiction is a setting. So you can have a sci-fi book that's also horror. And so maybe it seems natural to me that, well, if you've got something where it's kind of a thriller, but it isn't, then maybe you pitch it on the setting rather than on something else. So, and then rely on word of mouth for people to go, this is great. and not spoil the twist for their friends.
I mean, we are kind of hampered by we've discussed this before, that people don't read across genres. People think that the setting, so on television, you never go, oh, well, I only watch science fiction, so I'm not going to watch a comedy. But in books, there's plenty of people who will go, well, no, I only read science fiction, which is a strange, you can enjoy multiple things. And in fact, I often have to go into many different genres on television because there isn't that much good stuff available that you could restrict yourself. So as I said, I watched True Detective, even though I hate crime, because it was good.
My theory is it's the investment. If you think about the investment in watching a television program, it's maybe an hour. And you can potentially go into the kitchen and make a cup of tea while it's running, sort of listen half to it while you're in the kitchen making a cup of tea, and then come back. And probably public broadcast wise, it doesn't cost you anything. Or if you've got a cable package, you're renting the cable package, you're not paying extra for that specific program. But if you take a book, to read a book, maybe you can borrow it, but potentially you're going to be buying that specific book rather than another one. The investment to read it is more than an hour. And if you want to make a cup of tea, it's very difficult to make a cup of tea while reading a book. So the whole cost of reading a book is potentially higher for a lot of people than watching a television program.
But for me, it would be down to the author, that cost, that investment. So if John Scalzi said, hey guys, I've written a cowboy novel, it's no robots, there's no science fiction, I go, okay, fine, I'll read a cowboy novel. I don't mind if it's good. But most people will go, oh, a cowboy novel? No, I'm not going to bother reading that one. I'll get the next one when it's sci-fi again. Which, I don't know. That's my impression, at least. I don't know whether John Scalzi maybe has enough of a following that that people would, he's good enough that people would just go, oh, yeah, fine, I'll read a cowboy novel. But I don't know, because a lot of the biggest authors in the world tend to write the same genre over and over, to their detriment sometimes, I think.
Depends. I was thinking that Neil Gaiman doesn't, but I thought, well, no, Neil Gaiman writes in the genre of Neil Gaiman books, really. You take any of one of his books, they're in different places if you try to put them by genre, but they're all recognizably Neil Gaiman. And Neil Gaiman fans read it because they like Neil Gaiman, which is where I'd like to be. I'd like people to read my books because they like books by me. So potentially he demonstrates that it is possible to cleave out a covering several genres space if you've got a style that lends itself to that particular, to being almost a subgenre of its own.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I wonder, so I've had trouble as well with people saying that the books I write are very different in tone and in approach, which is intentional. Like when I wrote Bitter Ed, it was meant to be like Terry Pratchett or Robert Asprin and that kind of thing. When I wrote Hard Vacuum, it was meant to be like an 80s movie. And they do, hopefully, people say at least, that they do match that style, but that means then I couldn't say that I bring a Terry Pratchett style to a Hard Vacuum, because that's not true, or to Blood Cruel, or to anything else I've written, which then means that people are looking for the genre as being a similar thing. So it is kind of tricky, because in a way, I don't mind writing just science fiction and fantasy, but I do want to kind of vary the tone. I don't want to just write the same, like Stephen King mostly. Actually, that's not true. He's written as Richard Bachman, science fiction and things like that. But most of his books, at least, are the same kind of genre and tone. Agatha Christie, I'm not sure, but I think mostly she's just written. She just wrote detective fiction. So it's a tricky kind of thing, but yeah, not sure what the solution is really. Oh, I had an idea today that I don't know whether maybe you'd be interested in, Dave, because it might be too tricky for me. So I was watching a thing about the Magnificent Seven because the new movie just came out, and they were talking about the 1960s Magnificent Seven and Seven Samurai.
Yeah.
And they said, well, both cowboy movies didn't work as well because in Japanese culture there's a rigid social structure that isn't present in westerns because everyone's pretty much the same level. There's no like hierarchy that's bred into the culture. So I thought, okay, well, what society or what facet of society has that kind of structure? And then I thought, well, that would be corporate structure. Like you have executives and you have people below that and people below, and then the common workers and things like that. So I thought, well, what if you had the Magnificent Seven, but they're all lawyers and they're going up against a corporation? So the corporation is the baddie who's poisoning the water or whatever they happen to be doing. And the villagers are random people whose children have gotten poisoned or something like that. And they need help to bring a class action lawsuit against the corporation to get money back. But they need 7 lawyers who are all really good at their specialties within the law because it's a complicated case to work for free for years and years.
That's intriguing.
So you need to find a way that they could, so that they need to find the first lawyer who then goes, okay, well, I'm going to try and track down the other lawyers. And he finds each one of them has a reason why they would take that case. That can be different each time. Like one of them's washed up and has never done whatever part of the law he's meant to be doing for ages and ages, and he's just taking crappy little cases. And another one has his own kids, so they kind of say, well, what if it was your children who were, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought since you know the law obviously a lot better than I do, that maybe it might be interesting for you.
My problem would be the fact that it would turn out quite tedious if I wrote it, because I do know law. So I can see what John Grisham's doing, but I really don't like John Grisham novels because on almost every page I have a no, that's not realistic moment. And like, okay, maybe American law is all about showboating and tinsel. And some of it's the fact that American law is crazy arm wavy shit rather than careful structure that I'm used to. But I don't think I could write something that was fun to read for people who weren't corporate lawyers if it was 7 lawyers against a massive chemical company. Yeah, maybe I could, but
I think, I mean, John Grisham obviously was a practicing lawyer for years and years, but so I think if the American law system is not as hand wavy and there isn't as much running through the rain in American law as he writes, I think it is possible to kind of go, okay, well, what's the halfway point?
Yeah.
Because you want to have enough little details that only lawyers would know that people go, oh, that sounds really good. That sounds really realistic. Like there'd be, acronyms or, where all the lawyers go out to hang out and all that kind of stuff, which I would never know. but at the same time, kind of allow the fact that there needs to be a showdown in the courtroom, I guess, where everyone's grandstanding, even though the judge might actually, in the real life, go, okay, lads, we're just doing a court case here. You don't need to do all this. So yeah, I don't know. I thought I'd mention it just as an idea I had. I wouldn't say I'd get the chance to write it. So, but also it could be science fiction, since you mentioned that earlier about the crime idea, that you could make it in a corporate dystopia.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah.
And then it might become easier then to say, okay, well, now the law is like this just because, and come up with a reason, I guess. Anyway, we kind of drifted away from Leitmotifs a bit, but we're coming up on our usual time. Was there anything you wanted to mention at the end, Dave?
Don't think so.
We did have one. Sorry, go ahead.
Other than next week, we have Edward / Anagrammatic David joining us.
Yeah, so I was gonna say that we've now talked to Edward Sullivan, who was our guest last week, and arranged that he's going to be our regular. He's going to be a co-host on the show every second week. So he has family obligations every second week. So every other week weekend he'll be here. So next week Dave is most likely going to be tied up with something. So it'll be myself and Edward will be doing a podcast, which was kind of our plan at the start. We mentioned back in the very early episodes we wanted 3 people just in case one of us was doing something that we could still have a podcast. So I'm not sure what we'll be talking about yet, but we're very happy that Edward's come aboard.
Yep.
So yeah. Was there anything else, Dave?
No, that's it.
Grant. Thank you all very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.